We're the All People's Health Collective, where organizers, advocates, and everyday people come together to demand care, housing, and freedom for all. APHC is fighting for care without control, housing without conditions, and dignity for every person.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the All People's Health Collective podcast. This is Susan, your host, and I'm here today with Nick Shapiro. We are going to be talking about some of your research, Nick, into deaths in LA County jails. You just published an article a few weeks ago, and there's also an LA Times article about some of the process of obtaining the data for that paper. But yeah, why don't we just get started? Can you just introduce yourself? Share a little bit about what you work on and what drew you to the work that you do.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I've I'm not sure if I'm a long time listener, but been listening for last year, so it's good to finally be here. And I'm in admiration of you and all your colleagues' work around APHC. So it's a pleasure to be running with y'all. I am an associate professor at UCLA. I run a lab called Carceral Ecologies, where we're like a multidisciplinary public health or environmental health lab trying to understand how policing and incarceration condition life and death across the United States. So we started out looking at the conditions inside prisons, jails, and detention centers, as in aggregate, those environments add up to the fifth largest city in the country, so larger than Philly or Phoenix. And so we worked on heat issues, we've worked on water quality issues, and the production of death behind bars. But we're also interested in moving sort of upstream from incarceration itself to policing and surveillance. And so we run a really large project looking at the impacts of police helicopter use here in Los Angeles. Um, and we also have a project looking at road safety, which might seem like a little bit far afield, but there are more people killed in LA by crashes than by homicides. So in terms of public safety, the roads are a dominant force. And the data that we use to understand crashes is most of it comes through police. And what we're finding is that the police reported data has a lot of errors and systematic errors that are missing injuries and deaths. And so this is sort of another way that the police data apparatus is sort of failing public safety in many ways. And so yeah, that's the lab that I run. The lab size fluctuates. Sometimes it's 30 people, sometimes it's 7 or 8. So it's a beautiful mix of undergraduate staff, community partners. We have forensic architects that we're working with, epidemiologists, neuroscientists. It's really, a eclectic group of people that are interested in solving or at least addressing really complex issues.
Awesome, super cool. And am I right that the recent paper, just going to read the title, Death by Incarceration, Detention, Duration, Overdose, and COVID-19 in LA County Jails from 2008 to 2023, that is also a collaborative effort through the Carceral Ecologies Lab?
Yes, yes. So it's my lab, Carceral Ecologies, and we also collaborated with this group in the law school called the UCA Law Data Behind Bars Project. And so they have a lot of they have a lot of epidemiologists on the team, as well as they're really a data clearinghouse. So they were doing a lot of systematic collection of data that is enabling new kinds of research.
Awesome. And yeah, this paper just came out, I believe it was July 28th, so about 2.5 weeks ago. Um, and I'm wondering if you could just walk us through the paper briefly, just tell us about the key findings and your research methods as well.
Absolutely. So the title is Death by Incarceration. And so really at the high level, the paper is about how jailing people pre-trial and jailing people in general is a lethal endeavor. we found that the people who die spend on average 5 times longer in jail. So they're exposed to jail at 5 times the rate of the people that are released or transferred out. And so we're trying to conceptualize jail time as exposure to something hazardous, like you might say, like exposure to COVID-19. It's exposure to something that could take your life away. And we were particularly interested in overdose deaths. And we looked at the federal research, and the federal research says that across the entire country, the median time from arrest to death for overdoses is a single day, sort of advancing this idea that maybe you are being arrested, you try and eat some evidence, or you're high while you're being arrested and you're in process of overdose already. And anecdotally, we've been talking with families and understanding there's a huge influx of drugs into the jail. And so we wanted to see if this median of one day is what we're seeing in the jails in LA, because we're hearing about people dying 2 years into their stay of overdoses. And we found that the anecdotal stories that we were hearing from families were correct. We found that the median time from arrest to death for people that died of overdoses in the jail system was about 2 months. So 60 times longer than the previously reported national median. And so this is, we can't say with that data exactly why that's happening, but we can understand generally that there's an influx of drugs happening to a captive audience of people facing dismal conditions in the jail. And families told us that their loved ones would go in without an opioid addiction and then leave allegedly of an opioid or fentanyl death. And so the county has started to install body scanners because we were also hearing that sometimes when you knew you're going to catch a case and you had a warrant on you and you're going to go spend time in county jail, sometimes people would take drugs and put them in different orifices of their bodies and be able to sell them that way. So the body scanners deal with that one source of influx from people that are incarcerated, but we know that deputies are bringing in, and other jail personnel are bringing in drugs to the jail. There have been multiple cases about this in the press, and we interviewed a formerly incarcerated person who testified to that process of deputies dropping drugs in certain trash cans and then picking it up and it getting distributed around the jail. So we do not have body scanners that are planned to be, as far as I know, at this moment, to be planned to be used on staff. So the issues that we point to in this article are, as far as I know, there's no plans to address that influx from deputies or other jail staff that have, a captive market of people that are looking to not have to face the pretty dismal conditions, more than pretty, the dismal conditions of incarceration in LA County Jail. Additionally, in the article, we do an analysis called standardized mortality ratios. And what that means is we are basically comparing the risk of death between the jail population, the California population as a whole, and the national, like the whole US population. So we're reproducing a method that was used in Chicago a while ago. And in that method, it was just Cook County Jail, which is a single jail, a large single jail, compared to the national death patterns. And we sort of innovated a little bit because California in general has a much lower mortality, usually a lower mortality rate for a lot of different causes of death than the national average. So this is a better comparison population than just comparing it to the national average. And so in comparing all causes of death between LA County Jail and California as a whole, we found that the jail was statistically significantly more deadly. And part of this is how many people are dying, but it's also at what age are they dying. So it's age is incorporated into this. So people are often dying younger in jail of certain conditions, which can be part of that calculation. And so that's a surprising, maybe not surprising, it's an astonishing finding where in a place where it's supposed to be the pinnacle of accountability, where there's constitutionally mandated access to healthcare and food, where there's no car crashes, where there's no guns. People are still dying at a statistically significantly higher proportion. And so then we drill down into the specific causes of death. And there are many causes of death that are much, much higher in the incarcerated population. One of them being pulmonary embolism. And this is actually something we wrote a different paper on. So we actually have a paper specifically on why incarceration probably increases the risks of pulmonary embolism. And that was over 10 times more likely to die of pulmonary embolism in jail than in freedom in California.
Wow.
And you can think of the case of Stanley Wilson Jr., who was a former NFL player who died of pulmonary embolism as he was being transferred to a state mental health hospital. And there are a number of other conditions, but overdose was about 50% more likely. You're 50% more likely to die of overdose in the house of the sheriff in the LA County Jail than in freedom in California. There are numerous other causes of death that were elevated, and there are some that were lower. So diabetes was lower in jail than in freedom in California. And I think it's hard to understand exactly what that means, but we can also understand from that number that we really do not support uninsured low-income people in freedom very well. We can also understand that when the county took over healthcare provision in LA County Jail as a result of federal intervention many years ago, that they did focus and they invested in diabetes care. So we don't know exactly which side that difference comes from, whether it's the dismal care we give to people in freedom or direct investments in LA County Jail for diabetes care. But that was, one of the cases where people were less likely to die of that condition in LA County Jail. And so, yeah, I can go on, but it's a real accounting of disproportionate risk and showing how, at the end of the day, we are exposing already more vulnerable communities to even more risk of death, and really showing that duration of incarceration needs to be brought down. People are being incarcerated for a long time, and that's correlated with death. So it's not only do we need to reduce the jail population in general, but a key way to do this, and Jay said the county body that's charged with investigating jail closure, they have also recently said that reducing incarceration duration is important to reducing overall population, because you'll have, if there's the same amount of people but they're being incarcerated for lower shorter durations, then that's going to reduce the overall population because they're not going to be there at the same time. So the conclusions are really decrease exposure to jail. Jail is a public health threat. And so that can be done through decreasing duration of incarceration, investing in diversion, and also for those people that are incarcerated, really an investment into substance use disorder treatments, and also widespread Narcan access. And yeah, I think those are some of the high level impacts. I'm happy to dig deeper, or maybe I've gone on too long already.
No, that was great. That was super useful. And this is just such incredibly useful research. I mean, not just for policymakers, but I would imagine like organizers, community members, people putting pressure on these institutions. So just really appreciate this. And I would imagine also there haven't been, you mentioned one paper on Cook County, but it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of research done in about child deaths in other places, especially like disaggregated to this level.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's part of it's the way that scientific production values statewide, regional, and national studies over specific counties. And so it's just
Yes.
hard. It's hard to get placement in peer review journals of a single county study, even though this is the largest jail system in the country. So there's all these other factors that make it difficult for academics to um, be incentivized to do this kind of research.
Yeah, totally. I also just want to bring us back to some of the methods that you used for this paper. So you mentioned talking to families, obviously before, during, after creating the paper, and you also wrote a little bit about oral histories that you had conducted with families who had loved ones who died in these jails. The paper itself is pretty quantitative, and it seems like some of those, oral histories didn't quite make it in. But I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about what you and the families that you spoke with want to foreground in the conversation on jail deaths that maybe didn't make it into this paper.
I really appreciate this question. Yeah, thank you for that. I yeah, there's all these different collaborations that went into this paper. And so before this paper, there was a different project on oral histories, and we haven't published them. We haven't published the transcripts or the videos or our analysis. We had some presentations about it. Um, but it's very sensitive to um, to publish all that information. Some people are in the middle of litigation. And so we actually just started today building a website where we will be able to make some of that public. So it's very
Amazing.
very good timing that you're asking about it. And so that
What's the, sorry, what's
sorry?
the name of the website, or is it not public yet?
Oh, it'll be on Carceral Ecologies. We're gonna our current website, please do not go to it. It is an- underwhelming at best. And so we're working on a website that will have integrate all of our research, including oral history has been, part of our method for almost all of our research. And so we'll have an archive of oral histories there. And so this project actually has an APHC tie-in. I hired a PhD candidate named Rafiq Wabi who organized with APHC for a while too. And so Rafiq and I and Helen Jones at Dignity and Power Now, and an undergraduate named Renee Grange. That was the core oral history team. And so Helen Jones lost her son in Men's Central Jail in 2009, and is really, along with this woman named Michelle Infante, the the thought leaders behind this. They taught me and another colleague how to critically read autopsies. This project began as community initiated research, not from like me reading the scientific literature or the newspaper or looking through data, but it began from um, the community demanding it happen. And so that was the beginning. We did oral histories with a number of families. So there's a LAPD police helicopter. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to catch it there. Going over. We can talk.
Grim.
We can talk about that project later. Um, and so yeah, we performed oral histories with families that were impacted by jail deaths in LA County, and those were some of the most intense oral histories that I've ever been privy to. And the families showed tremendous courage in opening up some of the worst moments of their life to the team as we walked through both the history of that person so we could memorialize them and sort of celebrate them on their own terms in their life, as well as get into the forensics of what exactly happened and what documents they've been given or images or CT scans. And some of those oral histories were just a couple hours, and sometimes we would be there for 12 hours. There would be as few as I think one person, but oftentimes it'd be many. I think up to five people. So like the whole immediate family sort of gathered around over a meal, trying to figure out what they understand happened. And so that was an earlier project. And then in looking back at those notes, there was one case in particular and of Jelani Lovett, whose mother, Terry Lovett, doesn't believe the medical examiner's assessment that her son died of substance use. And so our investigation, and he died, I think, 2 years to the day after he was jailed in LA County Jail. And so that was the first case where I really started to think about access to opioids and drugs deep into jail stays. I knew someone else whose father was working in the jail, and he developed substance use disorder for opioids, and then my friend did as well, like through the jail. So I was aware of the if you're looking for drugs, go to LA County Jail phenomenon. And this was the first time I had really through Jelani Lovett's case, in which Terry Lovett contests the medical findings of. That was the first time that really struck me that there might be something very different happening in LA County Jail than what's been reported nationally before. And this is an oral history that actually happened here under the orange tree over there. So yeah, whenever Terry comes into town, she stays in the guest room. So this is like part of the family building, relationship building, friend building, trust building work of repair of these kinds of deaths that happen behind bars. And so some of the families we've stayed and built these connections that sort of expand past the work. We're friends, and some of the families call me family, and I call them family as well. And some are more of like a solidarity during the interview, and that's the end of the conversation. A lot of families are trying to move on, and so if we keep trying to get people involved in ongoing work, that's actually can be harmful. And so there's often a time where we need to understand to leave people alone after these interviews, and that not everyone wants to be involved in an ongoing way. And so that's sort of part of also why that archive takes time to do correctly and do ethically. After the new administration, we're going to want to get reconsent to share everything because there may be different political situations in different families. So those are some of the background methods. Is the study is responsive to impacted community members, particularly Helen Jones, demanding researchers look into this. And then Helen was there at basically every interview, doing the interviews alongside me. And I don't think people would have wanted to sit down and be interviewed by me if Helen wasn't there. And so Helen was at I don't know, is the cornerstone or part of the foundation? I'm not sure which like structural metaphor to use. But Helen's vision and commitment to showing up at all of these interviews for many years was key to it all happening. And so from there, then we also did years of quantitative analyses. And that involved, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but probably around a dozen public records requests, We found data not only at the medical examiner's office, we found county um, disposal of unclaimed bodies reports, their cremation logs. We talked with reporters. We got data from the Department of Justice for the state of California, from the uh, Inspector General of the Sheriff Department. We had to go everywhere. We To get the length of stay data, we had to do many public records to the Sheriff Department. So this was, a data collection issue. And then we had to figure out how to do this kind of analysis. So it took years and years and years, and some of the people initially hired into the work from at the law school moved on and became faculty, and they remained committed to the work despite being pulled in different directions. So you'll see the author line is huge because it's many undergrads, formerly incarcerated people, many epidemiologists, lawyers. It took a real village to figure out how to do this work ethically, correctly, and in a way that's statistically robust. So yeah, it took a long time and a lot of people.
Absolutely, yes. I did see the blog, and yeah, it's really wonderful to hear you talk about the oral history project. I'm a I used to do history, so always a big fan of that side, but also just because this paper is so quantitative, I just think it is really wonderful to hear you talk about how there's also this project of ongoing like mourning and memorialization, and the commitments that you as researchers have to the family members and communities that have been harmed by these deaths. Um, and I guess just turning to the last bit of what we were talking about, the quantitative side and data requests. So this article that came out in the LA Times on, I believe it was July 26th, that you were quoted in discusses some of the really long delays that you faced in these record requests, the lack of transparency, just the difficulty in getting data. And they're sort of shifting shady practices and making records available to you and online to the broader public. Um, so I'm wondering if you could just talk us through what that process was like a little bit more, and then also maybe more abstractly, in interpreting this kind of data, which is obviously state data. It's partial, it's not reliable a lot of the time, and has its own investments and whatnot. What do you try to keep in mind?
Yeah, no, it's a great set of questions. And yeah, interestingly, the jail paper and the PRA, the public records paper feature in the LA Times are about sort of somewhat separate projects. But they're both have a lot of overlap in terms of methods. We need
Sure.
public records to do our analyses.
Mhm.
So the sheriff was really the focus of the jail paper, and then the police helicopter work that we do is really focused on the LAPD because they have the largest helicopter police fleet that they, by their own statements, of anywhere in the world. And historically, it began here. Patrolling by helicopter began in response to the Watts Rebellion in 1965, and then spread across the world. Um, and so for the helicopter project, I'd been noticing that the LAPD stopped publicly posting the responses to my public records requests. So normally, if you do a public records request to the LAPD, they will, and they have responsive records, they're going to post that publicly, and so that I could see it, so I don't have to request it myself. Um, and that is really helpful for transparency. So I don't have to. It also probably helpful for them in some ways because I don't have to bug them to get the records that they already gave you. Um, and it's a standard practice. They use a third-party software that's designed to do this because that's the standard. And I noticed that they stopped publicly posting these public records. And I also noticed at the same time that they were sort of kicking the can down the road in a way that didn't feel legal to me. I'm not a lawyer. So there's this dual issue of um, me not being able to see if other people requested the information, other people not being able to see what information they had supplied, the LAPD had supplied to me, and also just acute frustration where normal low-level requests were taking, months and months and months and months and months and months and months. So I figured out that I could download the entirety of the public repository for all of the city of LA. And yeah, I do weird things with frustration. And so
Pretty awesome.
yeah, I didn't know that that was possible. And so I downloaded all of that, and it was missing a lot of fields that would have been helpful. So I sort of inferred which department it was by um, they would say PD, so police department, in some of the fields. But so I had to sort of extract and estimate what queries were to the police department versus other departments, and then I was able to cross-reference that, and my numbers were correct. But basically, I found that there's been since the spring of last year an almost total what's the right word? Uh, stop a total stop of the
Mhm.
public release of I was trying to use a fancy word and then I wasn't sure which fancy word to.
Moratorium, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's way better. Let's roll it back. Let's do it again. um well, yeah, I think the way that I describe it is that like the public release of responses to public records requests for the LAPD fell off a cliff. And it's really dramatic. We wrote up a little research brief about it, and sent it to the LA Times, and that's why that story happened. And yeah, they just stopped publicly posting these
Yeah.
responses.
Is it
And
a stoppage on all responses, or have you noticed a trend in what kinds of things all public and what is being withheld?
it's hard to yeah, we don't know the content of what's being withheld at this point. I could dig deeper and spend more of my evenings and weekends on it, but I haven't
Mm.
quite done that. But what I can say is that the other city departments have not changed. It's only the LAPD that has stopped. And so there's some sort of a policy shift that happened at that moment. And they've also well, not simultaneously, but this actually is an even longer tail. Like it started even earlier. They stopped being clear about the final disposition of a records request. So they used to say like closed released records or closed partial release, redacted or exempt records or rejected or withdrawn by requester. And so that information I could use to answer the question that you're asking, but they've stopped doing that. And so now over
Right.
90% of the public responses say closed other. So it's all of these multiple ways where our city government is uh, not being transparent. And yeah, there's lawyers looking into the legality of that, but that's all I can say about that.
Yes. Yeah. We do a lot of records requests at TRC for research and mostly for litigation and the kind of weaponized incompetence and bureaucracy is so frustrating to deal with. So, really sympathize with that. I feel like, public records requests also are obviously very widely used by academics or, nonprofits, researchers, but they're also open to anyone, right? So, For any listeners who might be interested in, conducting their own investigations, do you have any suggestions on how to approach that process without a lawyer?
Sure, yeah. Again, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I there it has shifted. There used to be all of these tools where you could get a generated text, like the FOIA generators and all these things. And now there's AI that can do some of that for you for better or worse. But the biggest thing to know is that there are two different, well, maybe 51 different um, laws for public records. So if you're looking for federal records, that's a FOIA request. So, and this is to the executive branch. So all of the, like, if you're looking to get ICE records, that's going to be FOIA, and that's going to be a different process. And you're going to send it to different people than if you're looking for state records or county records or municipal records. So in California, we file under the California Public Records Law. And in this case, if you do file suit, and again, I'm a little hazy on this, I'm not the lawyer, but in California, I think if you if the government is illegally withholding public records that you've been requested, and they're not supplying them and you're entitled to them and they're not part of exemptions, your lawyer's fees are covered, I believe. And so that allows for public advocates to engage in defending their rights in a way that, if you're right, that you aren't financially burdened, which I think is very helpful. So in part of the helicopter research, the sheriff department here also does have helicopters, and we with Shakir Rahman and Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, we sued the sheriff, and that was settled in that manner. So so yeah, I think that there are things to keep in mind if you're interested in getting into public records requests. One is like trying to be as specific as you can, because if it's really general and really broad, then it can be harder to get a response more quickly. So sometimes it's really helpful to know like the name of the document. Like there might be like a very specific name for a form. If you can say with that form, if you can say the year or years that you want it, if you have specific people for specific correspondence, that's great. But if you're seeking all correspondence from any time period between any individual, yeah, you're probably, I understand why you want to go fishing, but it's not discovery in a lawsuit. It's specific public records. And so you're more likely to get better responses on more targeted records requests.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful, and obviously a very specific set of skills and takes a lot to hone, but I think this is helpful for someone to just get started. And I think we're kind of coming up towards the end of this interview. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is just about, and you touched upon it a little bit already, the next directions for your research. And also how you hope this research, the jail deaths paper, can be activated, or how it, already has been.
Yeah, it's a great question. The jail desk paper has not been activated at all. I don't know. I like we worked with an amazing journalist, Carrie Blankinger, who was at the LA Times in the development of this work. And now she's at ProPublica looking at other things. And so she's like, this is important, but not, this isn't my beat anymore. So yeah, I I need to work on that. 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 I need commission in September, the Civil Brand Commission, and I've written letters to all of the Board of Supervisors and their staff. I didn't get any response. I've been busy working on different projects, and so I think I need to do more work on activating it. And I, in terms of next steps of our work, we're really um, we're really focused right now on this helicopter project that I mentioned, and that seems like far away
Mhm.
from the like visceral, tragic, horrific ends of life that happen and are documented in our other work that happen in contact with law enforcement. But really, there's a huge population impact of this helicopter surveillance and patrolling that happens in LA. Like, if you're not from here, haven't spent time here, it's hard to fathom. Um, they're called ghetto birds here for a reason.
Mhm.
And we're basically at this point, we're estimating, these are preliminary numbers, but we're estimating that around 7 million people per month are exposed to hazardous levels of noise pollution from law enforcement helicopters alone. That's a lot of people.
Mhm.
We're estimating that over 150 million, no, not 150 million, 150,000 students graduate every year from LA County public high schools that are 1 year behind in their grade reading level just because of the noise from helicopter police. Chronic
Mhm.
noise pollution dysregulates your metabolism. It can cause and exacerbate diabetes. It can lead to cardiovascular issues, asthma attacks, all kinds of things, car crashes.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a like state terror tactic as well, right? In extreme
yeah,
cases. Yeah.
yeah, sleep deprivation, that's like a key form of inflicting terror. Um, and so this is what we're really focused on. And we are we're doing private meetings with community groups across Los Angeles now, just to make sure that our findings are um, yeah, informing community groups first before we go public in any other way. So if there's listeners from community groups in Los Angeles, we're happy to come to you and talk about this work and see how it intersects with what you're doing. And we also have some work that we're hopefully moving towards publication in the next month or so about nationally how police pursuit deaths are not being reported correctly. And sort of that gets back to our road safety conversation earlier. But those are the things that
Yeah.
we're working on. And I really hope I have aspirations to get more involved in diversion related work and learn from colleagues at APHC like you about how those investments should be made.
Awesome. And yeah, just so awesome to hear about all the different directions of work that you guys are doing, things that I had not considered the road safety angle at all. But I think, you know, even though these are like can seem like very different things, are all tendrils, obviously, of the carceral state. And I think it's the way that you have approached it. You can kind of see how they all come together and these like extreme, end of life forms of violence, but then ordinary ways of just degrading life and making people's existences worse and more miserable. Sorry, that's a bit of a weak note to end on. Um,
It's you summarize my work better than I summarize it, but you're totally right. It's like is there's this focus, you have to focus on both of these things, like both these spectacular destructions of life and these cruddy, corrosive, common ways that people's energy is being sapped. Their sleep is being drained, one maybe even not conscious, like arousal from sleep at a time. Many of the times that people are being awoken by the police helicopters, they don't even know it, but they just are
mhm,
more groggy the next day. And they're more likely to get into a car crash or a fight with their spouse or kid or whatever, a friend. Um, and so I think exactly as you're saying, like our work is trying to understand these investments in public safety that are doing the opposite, that are costing lives and causing and exacerbating illnesses. Um, so we have a lot of work to do in realigning how we spend our money to actually protect public safety and public health.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. Just before we close out, is there anything that you just want to share or anything that we didn't get to that you want to make sure we talk about?
I was once told that I have I should start a sleep podcast after a lecture one day. And so I found that to be deeply dispiriting because maybe my was putting people to sleep. And I don't want to put your listeners to sleep. This is not a sleep podcast, so I think I should probably end here before anyone,
For sure.
closes
The
their eyes
sleep
on the road.
fiend. Well, thank you so much, Nick. This was just really enriching and super, super interesting to hear about. Really hope that you come back on the podcast and we get to talk more about helicopters and roads and your other areas of research.
I would love that. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.